If I'm upset and I go and work with my horse, he doesn't want anything to do with me. He's like, you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like, don't come in here with that nonsense. Well, Shawna, thank you so much for being with us today.
It is my pleasure. I love being here.
I am so pumped.
Yay.
So for people tuning in, we just came off a weekend clinic with Shawna on clicker training, which is your specialty. Mm-hmm. And it was phenomenal. So let's create a little framework for people that don't know of you or don't know what you do. When did you get into training? Like, take me back to the marine mammals and all that. Bring me back there and kind of give me some framework.
I will. And I think that this is an important part. It could be a touchy, triggery spot for some people, but I was abused as a child. So with the abuse, and it's part of the story, is why I say that. It's not, and I think it's important people know I didn't grow up feeling sorry for myself. I was like, that's just my life. That's how it was. But what happened when I was young, I liked the horses. We had a farm. My granddad had a farm with horses. And so we would go see the horses. When I was about 6, I recognized that the horses it was really hard to catch them because we'd just go on weekends. Yeah. And I realized they don't want to be caught. And it dawned on me, and I didn't know these words. I didn't psychologically get this. Yeah. But I recognized that they didn't want to be caught, but we're kind of imposing ourselves on them. And so I pushed away from the horses. I love the horses, but I didn't want to do that. So I go on my way, not doing horses. And then as an adult, I start thinking, I want to do, animals were a really big thing to me. And I wanted to, and I made a vow to myself when I was about 7 that I didn't want to be a part of any person or any animal's life unless I could help to improve their quality of life. Now, I realize people are very complicated, and that's really not my problem. But animals, they didn't necessarily ask to be where they are. We chose this. So I didn't know I'd grow up and have this be part of my life like that. So I went on my way, and then I was studying to do field research with the marine mammals. And actually terrestrial animals. But then I was going along, I did field study of finback whales, and I thought, why was I not thinking marine mammals? I was in San Diego, a little kid, growing up surfing and on the beach all the time and sailing. Surfing. And then I went and I then thought, okay, after that field study, I thought I'm going to get a job at SeaWorld in San Diego and work with the marine mammals while I'm going to school. So I got a job as just a summertime position working with the marine mammals as a trainer. At that point, you're not a trainer. You're a fish handler in the fish room. Right. But then they offered me a full-time position. So that's where I started. And that's where I learned to train animals. Wow. It was all positive reinforcement. That's all you had. We had no halters or lead ropes or any pressure. So that's where I started with that. And then so after about 8 years, Elizabeth Bush Burke of Anheuser-Busch owned SeaWorld, and she gave some of us trainers tickets to see a show jumping Grand Prix in Del Mar, which is by San Diego. And so we go, a bunch of us trainers, and everybody else was like, yeah, okay, bye. And I was like, I think I want to do this. Yes, and I really did. I thought I want to do that. Yeah. And I didn't even know what posting was. So I really wasn't a little lofty. But what I saw, and did I see stressed horses? I did. I saw more stressed horses than anything. But there are 2 horse and rider combinations that I looked at and I thought, that looks like a walk in the park. It looks easy. It looks fun. The horses, it looks easy and relaxed. The person looks easy and relaxed. I thought that's what I can do. Because now knowing how to train with positive reinforcement. So then after a bit, I got I met my husband, who is now my ex-husband, and it was, just a guy at the time, but he was an ex-Grand Prix show jumper. He had ridden with somebody named George Morris, who was really in the hunter jumper world. You know who he is. And so he had quite a strong career, but he had sold his business, quit everything, came to SeaWorld to get a job training marine mammals. as I started looking into horses. And so I met him and we started talking. How would this go? How would this go? How would you put it together?
Right.
Because so far at that point, all I kept hearing is no, 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 no. This is not how you do it. This is not how it's done. This is not, horses aren't smart enough. Horses aren't, and I'm like, I've seen target trained hyenas, meerkats, hippos, rhinos, lions, tigers, giraffes, goldfish, shark. I don't know why a horse wouldn't be smart enough for this.
Right.
But I kept hearing it, and I was like, well, I don't have anything to change that or to back that up that I think they could get it. So finally, we went and we had dinner with somebody named John Madden. Not football John Madden. It was Beezy Madden's husband.
Okay.
So somebody that vintage.
And Beezy, yeah, so Beezy is in the eventing world.
She's a
Big
show
time.
jumper.
Show jumper,
And
right.
she's gold medalist. She's done a lot. And so she is quite a nice rider, you know, and quite a lovely horsewoman as things go. And so her husband, we had dinner, and Vinton said, tell him about the training you did with the marine mammals. And so I said, this is how we train the marine mammals, this is what we do. And pretty soon he got more and more and more interested. And so then he went home with a clicker, because at the end, we didn't call it clicker training in the marine mammal world because we didn't use clickers. We used high pitch whistles and things. And so, but I had some left over from something with the walruses and otters. We had used them for a bit.
Right.
And so I sent him home with a clicker and these ideas in his head. And he went home, and Beezy had a horse who came to them terrified of the riding stick. You couldn't have it near him. Your neighbor couldn't have it on the ground, under saddle, any of those things. So he went home and he called, you know, the first day he was home and said, I not only got this horse to touch the riding stick, I can't get him to stop. So that's where it started. And he said, if we got this, there's a place for this in Grand Prix show jumping. Please come here, move here. We'll start a business. Let's put this into action.
Wow.
Because at this point, I'd finally started taking lessons because I talked to a man named Tom Dorrance on the phone.
Okay.
I mean, I saw a People magazine little blurb about him, and I thought, he sounds different than what I'm hearing. And he's the one who encouraged me to go forward. So I looked into it. I started taking lessons. I bought a horse. And so then met John and Beezy, then moved there with them. And that's where we started. And that was, 28 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So so for that duration, this is how long you've been doing positive reinforcement.
Yes.
It's been that long.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean,
That's awesome.
That's positive reinforcement with horses, because there's like 10 years before that.
Right.
So it's, 38 years.
Oh my god.
I've been doing this a long time.
What? So
I'm old.
I'm curious. What were some of the challenges that you faced? Maybe like name a couple challenges that you had from going from marine mammals to then horses, and how you kind of navigated that.
Yeah, and there were challenges I didn't know would be challenges, really. I mean, because I honestly thought...
Versus the water and land, right?
And I really thought, horse people don't know about positive reinforcement. They will be so excited because it's so effective. I can't wait to share it with people. That's not how it's been going. Well, now it finally is.
Wah.
Yes, it really was.
Yeah.
A wah, wah. So I was really excited about it. So it went great with John and Beezy. And I worked immediately. I worked with high-end people, Olympic riders and show jumping and dressage. And since I worked with international driving champions, world champions, and so now, but I started at the top with horses.
Right.
And so that was all very receptive and good, because I found the highest level were very confident in the things they did. So they were quite fine with, they were very open. They're like, I'm love to learn anything.
Right.
But the middle of the road trainers and then the brand new people were very receptive, because like, this just makes sense. And this is all science based. I didn't make this up.
Right.
But so it was the middle of the road trainers that were the hardest, but that people time and time again would not listen, would not take it seriously.
Yeah.
But if I could get them to listen for 20 minutes, I could tell them and teach them some of the science and put it together with a real, incident, real situations they could relate to. And they would start to go, okay, there's something to this. Maybe I'm not ready for it, but there's something to this. And so I think the hardest thing is I had to spend many, many years planting seeds and having to just sow the seeds and walk away and think when the time is right, they'll get there. And I think the other challenge was there weren't enough resources in the early days for somebody who does go, okay, I like this, I want to do more.
Right.
There's like one person. you know, and so I couldn't follow through with all that.
And people like to see that there's a crowd already moving in that direction before they step out and try to be a pioneer.
Yes,
right?
exactly. And I think that's where the middle of the road trainers were.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you know, I'm not top of my game. I'm going to do what's being done.
Yeah.
But nowadays, that's not the case. You got people bringing students and, you know, accepting it all over the place. So finally, after all this time, it is exponentially growing. You know, it felt like it was just going, but now it's broadening out and it's becoming more well-known and understood, movement. And which we saw this weekend.
Yeah.
Everybody there was familiar with it.
Yeah.
And it was a good amount of people. You know, it's not like, there was one time I did a clinic for a person, and you're like, okay, I'm going to talk to you like there's 50 people here.
And that's the best way to go about it, because I think one person, you don't know who they're connected to.
Yeah.
And that's, you know what I mean? That's a good mindset to have, is serve them and see what happens from there, too.
Exactly. And that's even if it's just one horse that gets helped.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully they'll have others. And, you know, but really, it has now grown, and now you get to kind of see the seeds of that. I mean, that, you know, the product of that, and then it's growing. So it's been very exciting.
That's awesome. What do you think is, like, kind of the pushback you get? Like, what do you think, where do you think people tend to get stuck when it comes to positive reinforcement? And have you seen any kind of movement with people that are feeling stuck?
Yes. I think this is a challenge, I think, is now more people are doing positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
They get excited about it, but some people get excited about it and kind of start going in that direction without really kind of looking into it more.
Yeah.
And then they fall in. There are pitfalls, as with any training. It can be done poorly, and you can get poor results. So I think people go in that direction, and then something comes out, and they don't know how to deal with it, and they say, this isn't for me. So I think if they don't slow down and kind of figure out, and so that's why I focus on trying to keep people out of those little traps that people can get in. So I think that can happen. And so the more there are, you do start to see more people hanging a shingle going, I'm going to, you know, I can help you with positive reinforcement, but they don't have a lot of depth with it yet, you know, so they don't always have the tools to help people. They worked with, you know, this number of horses. There's a lot of good people out there, so don't get me wrong.
Right.
But then I think as people get excited, I love their earnest excitement, but I think sometimes I'm like, well, let's get a little bit more experience so we can help people. So I think as there is pushback still, and mostly the pushback I think comes, well, one of the things that happened is with it, we did the Harrisburg Horse Expo. Mm-hmm. So it was Horse World Expo in Harrisburg, and they had, I went around, and I early on did expos, all the expos, Equine Affair, Equitana way back when, you know, we did all the big ones, and over and over again. That was kind of part of what we did. And they all kind of ignored me. Like, you knew the people. I was friends with the people that were the other clinicians there, but nobody bothered to be worried about me and what I was doing, because there was no, you know, there's nothing they were worried about. And people would see that was effective.
Right.
Like, they'd be like, you got something going there that I don't have, and that's great, but we're all fine. Well, at the Harrisburg Expo this year, just a few months ago, I heard 4 different people on microphone putting clicker training, positive reinforcement, feeding your horse down. Which, that can sound harsh and like it's a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because it means now it's becoming more
known.
Yes, and something, it's a force to be reckoned with. People are starting to have to put that somewhere, because if it doesn't, you know, coalesce with what they're doing, then they have to kind of dissuade people from it, you know, or if they don't know about it, or they've seen it done poorly. So if people don't like it, I know that one, they're either don't really know what it's about, because it is science. It's not like somebody invented it. It's already out there, or they've seen it done poorly, and perhaps it's a threatening feeling to their business, and the unknown could be scary, you know.
Right, totally.
So I think those are kind of the biggest pieces.
That's awesome. Why do you think it's such a challenge for folks to move in a direction where they can actually be more pleasant to their horse, and their horse will give that back? Why is that such a challenge for people, do you think? I know
That's
it's a
good
tough
question.
one, but
It is. I think I think there's a couple pieces. One, I think it is, for some people, it is the unknown. I've spent my life learning how to do it like this. I'm doing it like my grandpappy always did it, whatever. So there's some culturally, some history there. I think that there's also the people who have seen it done poorly. And this is a common thing. We've all heard people say, you can't hand feed your horse. Well, I've got people over the hand feeding, aggressive horses and aggressive about food, using food, and so it's not the hand feeding, but I think people unintentionally feed the wrong thing and they don't realize every time you feed your horse, you're reinforcing something. Yes. So I think they don't know that piece, so they've got themselves in trouble there. So people then think, ooh, that's it, or that's for softies, and I'm not confrontational. That's not how I like getting along with my animals.
Yeah.
But I think a big piece is fear. I think fear of the animal. They're large and they're big. To me, I was working with bigger animals, so I was like, they're little and fuzzy.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't scary for me.
It's not 23,000 pounds.
I'm like, oh, cute, you little 1,500 pounder. So it was a different mindset, So right. I didn't worry about that, but I think that for a lot of people, I think horses are intimidating. So if they act big, it can be dangerous. So they feel like they want to control those pieces. But the truth is, when you teach their mind to work with us, you actually minimize a lot of that danger. Yes. So it seems backwards for people, but it really is. So I think the fear, like if you're driving in the car and somebody cuts you off, you kind of get mad.
Yeah.
But really you got scared because you thought, I nearly got run off the road. What would I have done? Right. And so I think sometimes that fear gets turned to kind of an aggressive, protective mentality. So
and
I think
essentially you're trying to do the same thing your horse is trying to do, which is protect themselves, and
yes,
that's how we think too.
Yeah, and it is like two fearful, together,
right.
And so they feel like they have to control and be in control. And I think there's probably a smaller set, but I think there's probably people that there is some joy in the controlling.
Yeah.
But that's an emotional issue that they should be taking up with therapy.
right. Or a good friend.
Yeah.
And not the whiskey bottle.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So what are some myths that maybe some people that are listening, and maybe they're curious about clicker training, but maybe they've just heard too many myths about it or too many misconceptions about it, that you can kind of redirect and fix for them?
Yeah, I think number one is you can't hand feed your horse. And there's even Tom Dorrance, he used food. So what he said is he knew food was powerful, but he didn't know how to use it in a systematic way. Right. And that's what we figured out with the marine mammals. Marine mammal people are really who took it out textbooks and put it into big practical application. So, and the broad range. So now we kind of perfected it in that area of how do we do this to get the practical side of not lab animals, how to get things done. So I think one thing that is a big misconception is that food is going to create problematic behavior. And I think it comes from people inadvertently reinforcing the wrong things.
Right.
It's a hugely powerful reinforcer. And so it is a tool that we can really use. But it's also important that we don't use it. You can also use it unethically. You need to be sure. Like the marine mammals, they got all their food each and every day, regardless of what they did or didn't do. They got all their social interactions each and every day, regardless of what they did or didn't do.
Right.
So it was really important that we made it fun. You want to be sure that they're making choices and you're using food as a reinforcer, but not that it's so powerful that you create, or so limited that you create the resource guarding or the ill-mannered things. So I think the food not being clearly understood and how to use it in a systematic way. So I think there's that it can be dangerous or bad. And it can be if you're not aware. Right. I think the other thing is that it's just for tricks. Well, like the riding your horse trick, the getting in the trailer trick, the having the dentist float their teeth trick. Right. They're all things that the horses don't do and think is normal. We kind of have decided they're normal because we're familiar with them, but a bow isn't any different than loading in a trailer to a horse as far as how much sense does this make,
right.
So I think that's another thing. And then the other thing is that maybe it's only for groundwork and not ridden work. It's absolutely for ridden work. It's super powerful. I can't even imagine not using it with groundwork because you have, with ridden work, because you have so much clarity you can bring to the equation.
Right.
So I think those are probably some of there's more misconceptions than that, but it is definitely not just for tricks. It's not just for dogs. It's not creating spoiled horses. They're not just doing it for the food. In fact, so that's probably a big one.
Right.
A big thing that people think is that they're doing it for the food. There's a study where they gave animals free food. And it was done in the late 60s. Then they took that away and they taught them to hit a lever for food. I think they started this with pigeons and then moved to other species.
Yeah.
And then they gave them both options back. And what do you think they did? They went to the lever for food.
Right.
Which is interesting. They're going to bypass the food.
The free food.
To go, the easy
Yeah.
food for the lever for food.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all about the food.
Right.
Now, positive reinforcement can be done where we make it all about the food, and that's a disservice to our horses, to our animals, to us. But if we're doing it in a systematic way, it is the game of earning the food that becomes so powerful. So that's why they choose the lever over the food.
Right.
I think we've seen horses and you give them hay net and free hay, and a lot of times they choose hay net. So there's that game in it. Like I like doing crossword puzzles and Sudokus, and I love those. Nobody pays me to do them.
Right.
I don't get them all right all the time, but I love them. And there's something in us that likes to play games, whether they're video games or card games.
Well, it's that
or
little
sports.
kid in us. It's the little kid that you know what I mean? That wants to have some fun and
have these little challenges that kind of come in. I don't get that all the crosswords all the time. I like the Sunday or the New York Times because it starts off easier on Monday and it's progressively harder.
Yeah.
So with Monday, I'm like, I'm pretty good on Monday. So I got lots of reinforcement, you know what I mean?
Awesome.
I walk away like I'm really good at that. But
Right.
Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Thursday starts maybe getting a little tougher sometimes. Sunday, I'm like, I got 2 words, I think. Because I can't even check them with the other words because I didn't get enough of it. But I still want to do it. I still want to struggle through it. And so I think that I think it holds true for more species than we know. And I think that's kind of what that study showed.
Right.
So when people say it's all about the food, if it's all about the food or you have a sense of entitlement, then we've missed a part.
Right.
Some of the systematic approach has not been done because my plan immediately is how am I going to fade the food and the clicker and the target from this behavior? It doesn't mean I'm fading them all together from the whole thing, but I want to build longevity. I don't want to click every canard apart.
Right.
I want to be able to do upward transitions and downward transitions and circles and jumps and courses and have it all be able to do it without having it to be food behind it all. I mean, there's food that trained it. And I think it's important for people to also recognize that when we train with food, neurobiology now is behind a lot of this science.
Yes.
So now it's turning it into a hard science, which is amazing for us behavior geeks. Because now we're like, ooh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But one of the things they found is when we train with traditional training, which is pressure and release, it tends to light up a part of the brain that's responsible for fight or flight.
Right.
In that part of the brain is cortisol is produced, which is a stress hormone.
Yeah.
When we train with positive reinforcement, it tends to light up a part of the brain that is been referred to by some neuroscientists as a seeking system.
Yeah.
And this is seeking things you want and like and desire. And in this part of the brain tends to be endorphins and dopamines. Now, these 2 different methods produce 2 different emotional states. And that emotional
messages to the horse for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it comes out as, they remember when they start doing this again, they remember those emotions come forward with it. The history comes forward to say, this is how it is. So I think that's also really important to know. I don't think that's a myth because nobody really knows that, but I think understanding the relationship food can have in the emotional state is really important. We can change neural pathways. That's amazing and crazy.
It's powerful. It's
It
empowering too.
Yes.
Say you're walking in to work with a horse. What are your steps using positive reinforcement just to kind of paint a picture for somebody that maybe is tuning in that has no idea, like what's this clicker training thing and how can I put it to practice?
Okay. I think the first thing, there's mechanical things to get through. Like first, the clicker needs to have value because a clicker is what tells them, yes, what you just did is correct. And we call it bridge signal because it's the moment they do something right. We said, you've just earned a reinforcement. and it kind of bridges that time between we can deliver it. So under saddle, it makes it easy to think about that. You're like, well, cantered apart, I can't feed at that moment, but if I can click, I can say that piece is,
so it's like the marker. The click marks whatever just was done.
Yes.
That tells the horse, oh, that
was a significant moment.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we also call the bridge signal because it bridges that time lapse. So we want to mark that moment in time. So we need to condition that. And that's classic conditioning. Okay. So that is click, feed. It's Pavlovian. It's click, feed, click, feed, click, feed, click, feed. So there's repetition in that. So we need to give that value so we have a way to communicate. The next piece I like to do is I like to do a little bit of liberty leading.
Okay.
Which is just teaching them to walk with us and stay with us. So it's kind of extension now of the bridge conditioning. So now we're just going to add a step or two in it. But what I like about it is it draws, there's no clue but what my feet are doing. So it kind of draws their focus to us, which is an important component.
Right.
And then I go into teaching the target. And basically it's a marine fishing net float or whatever you want, to be honest. It doesn't have to be this.
Right.
And it's on a stick. And so it is a way that I could teach them to touch their nose to a target. And eventually I could teach body parts and all that. But it is a way, it's my new halter and lead rope. So if it's a way that I can create behavior. Again, that's to be faded out of most every behavior except for holding on a target. Because that's the behavior includes the target.
Right.
But, let's say I want them in the trailer. If I just stand there with a trailer in an arena and they're like, I hate the trailer. They're not going to really just elect to get near the trailer.
Right.
So if I have a target, I say, can you take a step in this direction? And then I can click and feed that part and reinforcing it and telling them they did a good job. And they think, okay, I might try that again. Mm. So it's building up the basic components. But in my head, and then from there, after I teach a few things, I have a podcast that is lessons in clicker training.
Awesome. So we'll link that too in the show notes so people can see.
Because you can, and that'll take you, those first 4 episodes takes you through the foundation, and then there's 50 episodes. Then it goes off into trail loading, clipping, under saddle, whatever those pieces are. Yeah. But the thing I think of too, when I see the horse, so my first thing is going to be a little bit of an assessment. Okay, I need a little analysis. What are they? What are challenges? Where are they? How do they feel to me? Right. And that is, I'm always trying to, because of that 7-year-old self of mine, I'm trying to create balance in their horse's life. I'm trying to help them be the best version of themselves because they live in this human-centric world. So I need to prepare them for different pieces of what this life is going to entail, know? And so I immediately kind of feel like, are you shut down, too quiet, and disengaged? If so, I'm going to try to bring that horse up and get a little more engagement, get a little more try, a little bit more movement, a little bit more eye contact. And so I'm going to try to bring that horse up.
Right.
More horses than not, because I work with a lot of sport horses, are too big, too much. Too
up.
Yes. I had a horse named Murray, and he was an off the track thoroughbred, and I was a lot of times saying, I got a little too much Murray. It was, you're just like, there's a lot of you in there right now. Yeah. So a lot of times, more often than not, I'm trying to bring them down. Yeah. I'm trying to get settling. I'm trying to get self-regulation, impulse control. I'm trying to help them regulate themselves and be able to bring high energy down so that they can slow down enough and can focus. And whether it's excitement, just as excitement goes, or whether it is nervousness that's been created. And so those are the ones I'm trying to bring down. So I always feel like getting the attitude right is the hard part.
Yeah.
Teaching stuff is actually really easy. But we got to get to, first I need to get a learner who can slow down and listen or can step up and engage. So I'm trying to get the horse to that place. And I still may be training stuff, but my goal is to try to round out those edges. Right. So that's kind of a thought I feel about them, and kind of trying to determine how can I get that attitude right. And then the other thing I may need to consider, they may have a particular challenge that is at the top of the list right now.
Right.
And so I figure out, how do we get there as soon as we can, depending on what it is. Sometimes it is something like they've got to get to the vet, they got to get in the trailer. Okay, well, we need to get this done. Or sometimes it's like, I wish they had a better flying lead change. And you're like, okay, we got to get that done too.
We got time for that.
Yes, exactly. But it's right, exactly. But you're like, this isn't, we're going to kind of take a little slower path to get there.
Right.
And another thing I always think of is slow down, you go faster.
Right.
And that is it. That's building that foundation. And what we're teaching horses to be is problem solvers. So now they start, instead of going, oh gosh, I'm just going to stand here until I'm told what to do, they start thinking, wait, there's something in it for me? And then they become invested in the training and the outcome of the training. I mean, because think about it. What's in it for your horse to do a flying lead change?
Right.
There's not. And as we put something in it, they start going, oh.
Yeah.
And so we want to teach them to be problem solvers. But that can take a little bit till they're bold enough and comfortable enough to kind of come out of that shell or to slow down, and think through those pieces. So, so there's the mechanical steps, but there's also kind of this assessment that I want to do and figure out how can I help them be the best version of themselves.
Right. Say somebody's like new to clicker training, and they want to start somewhere, but maybe they're just so overwhelmed with the problems they have with their horse and they just don't know where to start. Would you recommend them starting just simple boundaries in the stall, or
yes,
where should they start?
That's exactly where they should start. And that's a lot of times with the conditioning the clicker is the very beginning part. And the first thing I do is I'm going to teach them to keep their heads to themselves. Manners around food is the most important. So while there's that classic conditioning, the Pavlovian conditioning, which is just pairing a primary reinforcement like food with clicker, which means nothing originally, and just pairing the two together, that's a classic conditioning. It's just simple, those two together.
Click food.
Yes. And then there's operant conditioning, which is a training we think about where we're teaching them to operate on their environment. They're learning, how do I get this? How do I avoid this? Whatever those pieces may be, that's like us teaching them to hold still for mounting, getting in the trailer, carrying a rider, whatever those pieces are. So that's the operant part, which is different from the classic part.
Right.
But they're always going together. At least the operant always has a classic behind it.
Right.
Because it's just a repetition, starts building that association. But as we start with that is the very first part, is giving that clicker value. You can do it wherever you're comfortable. But I do have an operant component there, because immediately I want to be sure I'm teaching them manners and giving me some space. And so they're learning, if I want to get reinforced, I should be over here as opposed to in your pocket or pushing you or nudging you.
Right.
And so if it feels like a lot for people, I recommend you even can start with protected contact. Do it from the other side of a fence. And so it's anytime I feel like they look away, turn away. And again, that first episode of the podcast talks you through that place. But I like to start where they're most comfortable.
That's awesome.
So that can be in their stall.
Right.
It's a great time to do it. And it's just 3 to 5 minutes, as much as you can for, 8 or 9 sessions. And then you pretty much have that part wrapped up. That's awesome. It's an easy way to get started there.
We all go into a stall, or we go into a paddock or wherever. So just starting across the fence.
Yes.
Is like pretty easy.
Yes, it is. And you can feel, if it feels a little overwhelming with them going, oh my gosh, here you are, you can start to teach those boundaries in a place. And if they get too much, you don't have to react very much. You can just go, I'm just not going to reinforce that.
Right.
And it helps you get there and build that association.
Gotcha.
Because they do get kind of excited. Once they start doing it, they're like little kids going to Disneyland. They're like, oh my gosh, I love this. And so you're like, relaxation. I work on a lot of relaxation, softness, softening, keeping it together, and helping them to learn that you got to bring it down, ratchet it down for most of them.
Right. I keep thinking about owners and trainers and just people that deal with horses on a daily basis, thinking in terms of positive reinforcement, but maybe, we don't introduce the clicker yet. What are some things that we can do ourselves to be better and having the mindset of positive reinforcement? Like, what are some foundation things that we can just start working on,
like
in relation?
Behaviors?
Yeah, like things that we can work on ourselves to bring a better attitude to our horses. Like, what are some things that we can kind of change and shift?
I think it really starts when you start understanding the science. And my first book, I called it "You Can Train Your Horse to Do Anything." I'm writing a new book now, but it's because you could train them to do anything, but it really kind of covers the science and how they're learning already. And I'm going to say, it's not animal behavior. It's behavior. It just applies to people saying, can you do this with your kids? Can you do it with your spouse? Yeah. All of that. But, it's a little more complicated, of course. But I think as we start understanding the science, and I've had a lot of people, after they've been to some clinics, come back and say, this has changed my life. I'm different with my children. I'm different with my spouse. I'm different with my coworkers. Because they start understanding how motivation works. So I think what is an important piece, or piece that can really help, is if people just learn that part. Even if you're going to do traditional training and pressure release is going to be your focus, if you start to understand more about behavior, you're going to start thinking, okay, this kind of makes some sense. Yeah, I get that. I can see that. And you're understanding why certain things happen and being able to realize. Because if any behavior increases and then maintains in frequency, something's reinforcing it. That's all there is to it. They're either getting something they want or avoiding something they don't want. It's nothing to take personal. It's not them trying to be bratty or trying to be that. It's just them doing what has helped them to live in their world. So I think as we start to understand that, and if we can kind of think through those things, we kind of find ourselves getting to a more empathetic place with a lot of situations, not just our horses, but all around us. And if we realize, I mean, I've worked with horses that are really, really aggressive, like want to take chunks of flesh out of humans. I mean, you know, and you're like, you. And I'm like, well, I'm not going in with him. And you're like, I'm not going in there right now because that's just crazy. But I have to kind of say, I can't take this personal. They're just doing what has worked for them. And unfortunately, they've been driven to a point where this is what they feel is necessary to be safe. So I think it kind of can take some of that defensiveness, that, you know, making it, they're being a jerk, they're being stubborn. They're not. That's not their motivation.
Do you think that has something to do with, too, that as human beings, we tend to look at everything expecting a human response? We have human expectations for a different species, and that's where the maybe roadblock is a little bit, is that they're a completely different being. Yes.
and I think there's some places where we project kind of the negative, the unpleasant side of humans on them. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, so we kind of say they're being stubborn, they're being jerk, they're doing it, you know, acting like
really
they're spiteful.
They're being them.
Yes, exactly.
They're just being them.
And unfortunately, it's all human taught mostly. I mean, there's some things that are, you know, they inherit some personality traits, but mostly, because you can take a big giant personality and have them be a big giant personality, but be a very cooperative, you know, and want to work with you. So, or you can turn it into, it's going to be, you know, a fight their entire life. So I think that part, but people, as they expect it to go wrong, I think they do, they blame the horse for so many things, the worst things, but yet they're not empathetic enough with the other things, as opposed to saying, you know, if I see somebody, and I can see that somebody, a human, is in pain, and I can tell they're struggling with something, I don't criticize them and feel harshly towards them. I'm like, they're going through something, so let's give them a little leeway, or let's give them some support, or whatever we can do. And I think we don't do that enough with the horses, because if they're doing that, they're going through something, they're struggling to survive on some emotional level. And if we can slow down and go, okay, I get it, let's go there. So we're quick to blame them for things, but not quick enough to and this is a big broad brush stroke sweeping statement, but we're not as quick to say, okay, let me back it up a little bit. Let me see how I can help you. I think one of the things that I feel very strong about is, I think every healthy relationship in the world has healthy boundaries. Now, a lot of times horse people think boundaries, you know, get out of my space, and kind of confrontational. But I'm not talking that. I'm talking kind of, you know, okay, so I have some boundaries, or I don't want you encroaching on my space, but I'm not going to discipline you for it. I'm going to teach you the right thing to do. But I also want to respect their boundaries. Okay, so you find that, you know, that jacket hanging on the fence frightful. I don't go, well, that's stupid. It's a jacket on the fence. It's their reality that it's going to kill them. That's what they believe and they think. So I try not to dismiss that, but I try to respect their boundaries and say, I get it. That's a lot, and that's hard for you to deal with. So let's go a little slower. Let's back it up a little bit and see if we can't come at this in a little different way. And that's where things like the dentist, you know, and people just getting in and battling with them, instead of going, okay, let's slow down. I get it. It's a lot to take in.
Scary stuff.
Yeah, and let's go slower so you can process it and go, okay, I can do that. I'm comfortable with that. Okay, I can do that.
Do you think that maybe some of our lack of empathy towards horses is because we have lack of empathy on ourselves?
Yeah, I think...
And that when we start kind of having that self-awareness of being like, you know what? I had a crappy day today.
Yeah, I do.
I don't really want to go and put this, you know, out there or whatever. And
we do it with each other quite often. You know, people come home from work and then they've had a bad day and they're just taking it out on the people they're closest to. And so I do think there's a bit of that in there. I mean, I feel like society these days is getting more controversial or more confrontational,
Yes.
less tolerant, and there's pockets where people are really going the other way, but I think that it's kind of been something that in our country at least has become very prevalent, and it saddens me. And hopefully we can kind of turn that around and get back to being a little softer with people. But
Because it's actually easier to be
I know
kind.
it is.
It takes a lot of effort to be angry and negative.
Yes.
You know, like, don't get me wrong. You stub your toe or you get your finger bitten, you're going to be pissed for a minute.
Right.
But to live in that
Yes.
is a lot harder. And I can't imagine having much success, especially with, you know, horses. I mean, if I'm upset and I go and work with my horse, he doesn't want anything to do with me. He's like, you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like, don't come in here with that nonsense, you know? Like,
I like that. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's true.
and with a horse, if you wreck yourself, I mean, sometimes that's it, you know? So it's...
And I think about all that negativity. It is corrosive. I mean, physically, emotionally, it is not a good place to be. It's shortening our lives. It's creating more stress. It's creating more cortisol and all the things that we know are oxidative and not good for us.
Right.
You know, to just be able to go, okay, I'm going to let that go. I want more endorphins and dopamines and pleasantries and agreement. And I think that is at the core of my being. So that's what I like. And that's what I'm drawn to. Now, there's people that do positive reinforcement that are not that way, and they'll be quite vocal and hard on people doing things their own way. And I sometimes think, well, how doesn't this seem very hypocritical at this moment in time?
Right.
Shouldn't we be, you know, letting people explore positive reinforcement one little bit at a time?
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to saying, no, not like that. You're like, no, let's just help them get it right. And if it's just a little tiny bit, it's okay. It's a start. Most people started, I mean, I came from re-mammals, so that was a little different, but most people started where it was a little bit. They tried one little thing.
Right.
And so I think that, you know, taking that confrontational thing away is only going to make everybody better.
Yeah.
In my opinion. That's just my opinion.
No, same. And I think, too, like, something I've learned, and I'm sure you've learned it, too, you really have to be self-aware. You have to, like, practice that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes our egos get in the way. Sometimes, you know, and an ego can be healthy, but if it's driving the bus all the time, you're never going to be able to actually see maybe you're creating the same negative pattern, and that's why your horse isn't changing, or that's why you're not changing.
Yeah.
And, you know, that brings me to another question, too. Do you find that horses can sometimes get into an unhealthy pattern of behavior, just like sometimes we kind of can perpetuate that too?
Yes, absolutely. I think I see that more than anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That they've been treated this way. We create a lot of defensiveness in horses, and then it creates more spookiness, and they're like, you know, fight or flight, or freeze. You know, so I think that we do create a lot of it. We create a lot of those patterns, and I as a person, I want to always be growing. You know, there's been parts of my life that have been, you know, the abuse I had to deal with as an adult, and it, you know, I realized I had kind of stagnated emotionally for decades because of that, and so then I kind of was like, okay, I can heal, and I want to heal, and it's hard to heal, but I'm always trying to grow and improve and grow and improve and grow and improve, and that takes that self-reflection.
Yes.
That means I need to stop and go, okay, why did I just snap like that? You know, why was I get off terse about something?
Right.
And where'd that come from? Because it really wasn't about what they said, but I took it out there because
what did it
I needed
trigger
an outlet.
Yeah,
Yes, what was that?
Right.
And so I try to also think the same with the horses. I want it always to feel like we're growing and getting better, and can we keep improving and keep improving? And those are the people I like to be with. If I have somebody who's going to be stuck in their past and not interested in growing, that's okay. That's their journey. They're going to do it. But I'm going to choose not to have them in my everyday life, because that's not what appeals to me. So I want the same for the horses, to keep them growing and stimulated and improving, and improving their quality of life for me is the most important thing. You know, they didn't choose this. We chose this for them. So our responsibility is to be good stewards, to serve them. That's what I feel like anyway. I mean,
I
stop
totally
people
agree.
out there.
I totally agree with you. And I think that, just like horses gravitate to people that are upbeat and positive and are smiling and have a good, aura, I guess, around them.
Yeah.
I mean, we're like that too. Who are we kidding? We like being around people that are upbeat and happy and have something good to say or encouraging to say. We don't.
Yes.
I don't know too many people, unless they're negative, that want to hang out and party with the negative people.
I hate that hater. I love that.
Yeah, I love that hater over there. Let me go.
And I think it really is true.
Yeah.
Did you hear about, there was a study they did one time where they showed horses pictures of somebody smiling and the same person not smiling. They went to the smiling person in a photograph.
Yes.
And then they took it one step further and they did, where were they last time? And they remembered whether they were the good or the smiley or the not smiling one. They get that from a photograph.
Yep.
You tell me they're not getting it from our being when we're there.
They're getting
doing
it
our things.
tenfold from our being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that
100%.
study because I was like,
That's amazing.
That's saying a lot. So I agree. I think that when they feel like they can succeed and that they're like, okay, it's safe.
Right.
And that's, I think, is an important part. Creating a safe place for learning.
And it's not being like unrealistic. We all have crappy days.
Yeah.
We all have, but living there versus not, I think, is the difference.
Yeah.
And I think, even people that are profoundly positive most of the time, they're going to have a day when they're just not in the mood to deal with anything. And,
right.
And it's not this fluffy rainbow world of let's be positive thinking and doing and reinforcing all the time.
Right.
It's really just honestly being conscious, I think, about, this produces this result.
Yeah.
And if we want more of this result, then we have to cultivate it within ourselves. And it's just going to be that ripple effect, like that stone throw in the water. And that's going to kind of create this ripple,
And I think that's a great point, too, because there can be this kind of everything's, unicorns and rainbows, but in an unrealistic way. It can be an avoidance behavior still. Like, I'm not going to acknowledge that anything's going on. And so I think it's important that we stop and take the time when we need to acknowledge it. If we need to wallow for a little bit in something, okay, process it, get it through there. And I think with my growing up with the abuse, I had a tendency to just want to dismiss it all. But it kept getting suppressed, and it kept getting suppressed. It's still in there. It's still corroding my soul. And so it came to a point where it just kind of got lower and lower and lower till it bubbled up, and I finally
had to deal with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's what I try to do, is stop and go, okay, if I need a day for myself, if I need to pull out of this, if I need to stop, if I need to catch those moments and what's going there and accept it and realize it, and then try to get back to what works for me.
Right.
And so I think it is really important that we acknowledge that the really downtrodden and the fluffy superficial are both pretty in not a great mental space typically,
Right. And this is something I wanted to bring up with you because I know power of choice is so important. You had a choice to make when you came to that realization that negative things had happened to you. You could have easily gone the other way and said, well, you know what? I'm just going to be an angry person and create more negative around me because I'm upset that, this stuff
happened to me.
Right, exactly. And you could have gone that way. And there's no judgment for, people that have had that happen and they do go that way. But you had the choice there and you chose to acknowledge it and heal and choose that tough road, which really is like, the path of resistance because it's hard to heal and deal with these things.
And for a long time, I would push against it because you'd start to delve in and you thought, this is way too painful. I can't do this. And so you'd back out of it, shove it back down where it belongs. That's how it felt anyway. And shove it back down because you're like, I can't deal with it. I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And then when you're finally dealing with it, it was very visceral and raw and challenging. But the place you come out in on the other side of that growth, it was so worth it and
it's
so
liberating.
Powerful. Yes, it's liberating. It's empowering. But it was stopping myself, having to stop and think, why? To this day, I still have to stop and go, why am I doing this? What's behind this? Is there something behind it? Right. Maybe it's not. Maybe, it really is just, I stubbed my toe, or whatever. But is there something behind it, and trying to stop and recognize that those old patterns. And that's what our horses have to do. Sometimes we have to stop and recognize their old patterns.
Do you think sometimes too, maybe we relate to our horses a lot more than we think.
Yeah.
And the way that our brain tries to protect us from pain when we come against it. I mean, some pain, like healing, right? Mm-hmm. Some pain is good, and it's just your brain's way of trying to protect you, but move through it.
Yeah.
And with horses, I mean, for example, with dentistry, if they had a bad dental experience, and here I come with my bucket, and I'm,
all happy
and stuff, and they're like, who's this chick?
Yeah.
Like, I want to create a new experience in a positive way, but I find that I have to undo and kind of, go in, and I find there's so much relation between humans and the way we protect ourselves and our horses. And I mean, I don't know for you, but for me, that's what gravitated me towards horses, is because, like, I know what it's like to fear for my life. And I saw that in them immediately. I'm like, they know how I feel 110%.
Yeah.
And so there's that connection too. And so if people look at that instead of it being a dumb animal, I feel like it's transformative in that way.
I agree with you 100%. And I grew up, there's a big part of me that's always wants to protect the underdog. And I see a lot of animals underdog, but particularly horses, because they've been beasts of burden for so long. And I think there's been this dissociative kind of, we need them for transportation, we need them for war, we need them to plow our fields. So we can't afford them the luxury of recognizing their emotional state. So I get that there's been this kind of disconnect that's probably helped us get through the ages, but now it's time to change that and stop and go, okay, can't we slow down and help them through? So to me, they feel like underdogs, and I want to be the mama bear for those underdogs. I want to protect them, and I want to make sure that they're, that they feel safe. I want to see them grow. I want to see them be better, and so I think it really is. And how many times too, I'm sure you see this too, the person and the horse, you're like, ooh, you're a lot alike.
Yep. And then I say, could you please go get me a coffee? Which I would never say.
I didn't even like coffee.
And then the horse is like,
yeah,
I can breathe.
It is.
And
they're a reflection of us and us of them. I think so.
And I think too, something we don't often think about is we think we own them, but what if we actually belong to them?
Yeah.
Instead of it being, the other way around. What if they think that, they own us in a way? And some of them do.
And so do cats.
Cats too. Exactly.
And I really feel like our job is to be here to serve them.
Yeah.
And I really, that just resonates with me on every level of me. I'm like, I want to help you be the best version, the happiest version of yourself that you can be, and to be content and to be well adjusted, and there's a lot of work out there to be done to get more and more of them to be that way.
Right.
But fortunately, the understanding's growing about positive reinforcement. I think we'll start to change those tides.
For sure.
It's already started.
I agree too. So what is the change that you want to be in the equine world, what's the change that you would like to see moving down the line?
Okay, that's a good question, because it changes a little bit over time. I started with the very top, and that was fabulous. I didn't even recognize how big it was. And so, like, the first clinic we even booked was for the United States Equestrian Team and their Festival of Champions. You're like, I better practice somewhere.
Need to prep.
Maybe I should do one. But that was really the highest. That's kind of where it started.
Yeah.
And so then I realized, but this isn't just for Grand Prix show jumping. This is for everybody. Mm-hmm. So kind of went off into that place. But now I feel like the recreational riders have taken it on, or recreational horse owners, sometimes not even riding, have understood it, taken it on, and embraced it. And I find myself moving back now to the show world, because I think, and it can be a hard place to be in, because you can kind of see some people that horses are a business. They're not, they love the pony somewhere along the way. That's where they got started.
But it's last instead of first.
Yes, and at this point in time, they've lost track of all those pieces.
Yeah.
And so I think trying to get us back to that place is right where I am right now, is trying to reach the show world. I have Jessie and I are working. She breeds very nice hunters. I have a lovely, well-bred, conformationally correct, lovely hunter, moves well, has the promise. She's just turning 3, so it's not like we know everything yet, but it's off to a good start. And from what Jessie has produced in the past, they're really going to be a nice show hunter. And so she's working with her since she breeds them, small boutique breeder, but really trying to take her from ground zero, that little horse, and bringing her through with positive reinforcement to set an example in the show world of how we can do it.
Right.
And one of the things I think is really important, way back when in the marine mammal world, I used to say, and this is over 30 years ago, I would say, we must police ourselves from the inside and be responsible and showing that we're holding people accountable for, facilities that aren't doing this or whatever it is, before police from the inside, before police from the outside. And nobody really would listen to that. And then
that is like the gospel.
And then it's come full circle. But now it's gone to the horse world.
Yes.
And so again, I feel like it's a place, and social media is right in on that. So I think it is.
And not many people can get away with stuff without it being on TikTok.
Yes, it's true. It comes up everywhere.
It does.
So I think if we can kind of get more change, and it needs to happen at the higher level too, because that's the highest profile. If we can get more understanding of how we can do things in a way that helps epitomize the horse's well-being, as well as we can teach them to love shows, but it takes a little bit more time, or it takes a little bit. Sometimes you need to go, maybe this isn't for you. You know what I mean? Maybe we'll try another one.
But it's what you do too. Like what to piggyback on what you just said, like the policing from the in to the out. A lot of what you do in private will be rewarded in public.
Yes.
It's not like, go into the show and, make it look.
Show.
It's very much what you do from a basis of the stall and being faithful in those little movements that get you to, showcase that real exterior of, hey, this can be done, not in, the ways of negative and push and pressure, you know what I mean?
Right.
That whole deal. And
it's one of the things that first week I went and worked with BZ, all I did was 3 5-minute sessions a day in the stall with the clicker conditioning. And then the next 3 days, that was 3 days. The next 3 days I did 3 5-minute sessions a day with the target. That's all I did. And it was just do all this people work together. We want to do this. Is this where we're going to go? And so Vinton and I went and we're there. And that all went great. But that's all I did. The training didn't overlap with what BZ was doing. Right. And BZ is not one that is, going to throw around extra cute words. You're not going to say cute sweater. Yeah, it's just not really kind of her style. Right. And so she said at the end of the week, those horses you're working, all of them are remarkably better in the arena. And was the very beginning of me going,
for the win.
Yeah. I'm like, well, I don't know what to say about that. Yeah. But it really is. When we create more endorphins, more dopamine, more choice, more empowerment, we create happier horses, which can result in happier athletes. If we do it in a way that we're thinking about it, we can create horses who love this and can be really good at it and enjoy their lives more, which makes a better athlete, which makes a better performance, which makes a better piece.
And it makes them be the very thing that we would like, which is to be able to do more of the work that we're maybe trying to put out into the world, and they're doing it in a very happier mindset.
And they're kind of bred for gifts great movement, great jump, whatever it is. So it's already in there. So let's maximize what that is by making sure it's reinforced and letting them be the shining stars of it if they so wish. But we have to do pieces thoughtfully. If we take a really talented jumper to a show and he's nervous as all get out, we're not going to get out of him what we want. And in fact, we may be setting him up to get injured because he's too rigid and tight. And so I think that we really can have that if we slow down and look at those pieces and kind of do it right. So I do think there's this trend moving in the direction of let's look at what we can do to help them be happier. And yet we can still do it as a business, but we just need to kind of change some perspectives or perceptions, I think, a little bit, if we can. That's a hope.
I love that. And I, too, hope that it continues in that way. With practitioners, like on my side of things, I am encouraging more of that, too, as much as I can, which I hope it's like that ripple effect. But as far as the future goes, what are you seeing? What are you doing? What are your projects and visions? What are some things that we can support you in moving forward?
Well, I love that. I love support.
Yeah, I love supporting. So how do we do it?
I'm writing a new book, so
Yes.
I should have that turned in October to the publishers. It's through Trafalgar Square, Horse and Rider Book. So that's who did my first book. And so getting back to that, that'll be a good one because it's going to be more progressive. I've learned so much in the past 28 years. It has changed. I have changed and changed and changed and changed. And my bed of knowledge has just continued to grow. So it's exciting to be able to share those pieces.
Yes.
And I will get back to doing the podcast, which again is lessons. They're positive reinforcement lessons.
Yeah.
And I want to be showing my little gal and moving more and more into the show world. Yeah. I would like to get working with more show people again and helping them get through. Typically it's an issue they have, you know, this one isn't great for mounting, this one stops at water, this one is, whatever it is. So you can help them get to that place. But you know what, I think back in there somewhere, I think it's going to be bigger than I know. Whatever happens, I'm not going to minimize it with my human thinking. It's going to be, I don't even know what it might be. So I'm going to kind of just keep moving in this direction, but it's going to unfold as it should. So
I love it.
I just wait with bated breath and keep trying to spread the word and being out there improving lives of horses and people if I can, if they're receptive.
That's awesome. So do you have a date yet for your book release or?
No, I think the publisher said perhaps spring.
Okay.
Next spring.
Okay.
Because if I'm turning it in October, it'll probably be a year-ish from now.
Cool.
So I think
we'll have
that's
to have you back on and promote that too,
I think that'd be great.
That would be awesome. Where can we find you online, and where can we get in touch if people are interested in touching base with you?
If you go to ShawnaKarrasch.com.
Okay.
So you'll have it, Kay. I'll have it
all
written out for you.
Yes. Yeah, I'll write it out and have it.
Yeah. Go to ShawnaKarrasch.com. We have something called Shawna Uncut, which is a Patreon kind of membership thing where we really try to put a lot of just training sessions and not edited stuff up, and some directly talking about something, but it is a little loosey-goosey, but with lots of instructions, because there's so many people that watch regular sessions are like, I love how you did this or this or this, and I'm like, well, let's just show them this and this and this, and the bloopers, the warts, the times you're like, great, that was perfect, not, or whatever it is. And then I have the podcast is on there, and we have, I have people submit questions. I'm getting back to my Ask Shawna questions. So there's a lot of resources there on the Shawna Karrasch site that will take you to the specific
platforms and stuff. Awesome. So I have a couple questions left, but before I do, I just want to acknowledge you for all the work that you are doing in the horse world to make it a better world, not just for people, but for horses. I absolutely love that you're doing that. And I really look at you like a pioneer. I really feel like you're kind of starting the march, towards positivity, and also, helping us be more aware of ourselves and, getting to that point of liberation and, liberating our horses too with giving them choice. And I just really appreciate all the work you're putting out into the world. I'm so excited to see what you're going to be doing moving forward. And I can't wait for more clinics.
Yeah.
Are you going to be doing more clinics in the next year? Or like if there's farms out there that want to host you, is there a way that they can find a way to do that and connect with you?
Yeah, on the website we have the clinic schedule. We're adding dates all the time. Okay. So Jessie Hilligus is who I'm working with, and she kind of helps organize. She's great at helping the host and great at training, and wonderful horsewoman. So she's my partner and part of this, doing this moving forward. So there, you can her contact information. Yeah, it's Jessie at ShawnaKarrasch.com.
Awesome.
Because it's all about me. But thank you for your kind words too. It serves as a reinforcer for me. Yes. So many years you just have to go, hope somebody likes it and joins in, and you kind of would see them going, okay, something to it. But it really is nice to see and hear people that are seeing it and appreciating and it's helping make their lives or their horses' lives better.
And it's reinforcing the positive that you're doing too, which is...
It's totally is a reinforcer for me.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
It's really awesome.